This came out in 1972, which was also the year that my mom went to consciousness raising. The glorious results appear before you. We had this record. I still know the words. I remember going around the schoolyard and asking the girls one by one, "Are you for women's lib?" That's what I said, women's lib. I was 7 years old. But I wanted to know who had my back, who was going to dig down and find some courage and fight for women. I'm 59 now. I've lost every battle I've fought. But I'm still asking, are you for women's lib? For asking that question, for asserting that women are a material class, I've had so many death threats that men with guns have been assigned to my protection detail. If you had told me 30 years ago that radical feminists would one day need armed guards in order to speak, I would not have believed you. And it's not the government that wants me dead, not the pornographers or the pimps, and not right-wing ideologues. It's entirely men on the left, specifically men who call themselves transgender. How did we get here? Well, you've heard of speed dating? This is speed revolution. This is the basic insight of feminism. Women share a common condition, and that condition is political. It's not bad luck, it's not choosing the wrong man, it's not created by evolution, and it wasn't ordained by God. None of these horrors are inevitable, which means that for male dominance to continue, every generation of boys has to be molded into dominators. Being a real man requires a psychology of entitlement, emotional numbness, and a dichotomy of self and other. Female socialization is a process of psychologically constraining and breaking girls, otherwise known as grooming, to create a class of compliant victims. Across history, this breaking has included so-called beauty practices like female genital mutilation and foot binding, as well as the ever-popular sexual abuse. Femininity is just the traumatized psyche displaying acquiescence. Gender demarcates the geopolitical boundaries of patriarchy. It divides us in half, but it's not a horizontal half. It's vertical. Gender is not some cosmic yin and yang. It's a fist and the flesh that bruises. It's a mouth crushed shut and a girl who will never be the same. Without feminism, the realities of women's lives are unspeakable. Each woman cut adrift in a hostile, chaotic sea. Apply the words sex class, and that chaos snaps into a sharp pattern of subordination, from the small daily insults to body and soul, to the shattering traumas of incest and rape. The crimes men commit against women are done because women belong to a subordinate class, and they're done to keep women a subordinate class. It's not personal, and it's not random. It's political, and it's unjust. To get justice for women, we have to dismantle the caste system called gender. Brick by brick, we have to bring it down, not accommodate to it, not make the best decisions we can inside it, but bring it down. And now we come to the newest brick in that system, transgenderism. Reading the words of girls who think they are transgender has broken my heart in ways that will never heal. In their own words, this is what makes them transgender. I like skateboarding. I love math. I want short hair. I hate my body. They want physical freedom, a life of intellectual pursuits, and bodily integrity. They want to be human beings, not objects. Feminism is very simple. It claims all women are human beings, not objects. Feminism is also very hard because, in the words of Andrew Dworkin, it requires precisely what patriarchy destroys in women: unimpeachable bravery in confronting male power. Transgenderism is also very simple. It claims some people like being objects, and those people are called women. Other people don't like being objects, and they are called men. This is innate, immutable, created by God or evolution or hormones or something, because clearly women's little brains can't handle the rigors of skateboarding or math. Instead, we are compelled by God or evolution or hormones to be pink, precious princesses. And when we age out of that, the pornographers are waiting. 12 billion searches. 14-year-old girls aren't stupid. The only world they see is a cage made by men and their predations. The only feminism they see is a celebration of collusion, not any kind of resistance. The personal isn't political now. The personal is personal. And some girls hate their bodies because they are really boys. This is the way out. Refuse to see yourself in other girls. Deny the caste you all inhabit and the system that puts you there. You are a human being, they aren't. Any route to sisterhood, any rumor of female solidarity, any last whisper that once there were women who were warriors is gone. In my teen years, we punished our bodies with eating disorders and self-harm. And yes, those spread by wild social contagion. Those practices have now been medicalized and institutionalized. Your doctor will take care of that horrifying female fat with chemical injections, and your surgeon will do the cutting for you. And most of the girls who are shunted down that path would grow up to be lesbians. It's the gay and lesbian kids who are being transed. Young lesbians are being gutted of their uteruses, their ovaries destroyed, their breasts sliced away, and their vaginas atrophied, all before they can vote. Free to be you and me through chemicals and surgery. They should be our next generation of warriors, and instead the battlefield is their female flesh. The loss is not just individual. Lesbians are always the beating heart of women's liberation. Every so often, lesbianism and feminism come together for a brief moment, and there's an explosion across the culture. Women make progress when women love women. It really is that simple. Lots of people are bewildered about where this movement has come from. I see three main tributaries that built to this flood. The Trans Triumvirate. Magnus Hirschfeld, born in 1968, he was a German doctor and sexologist. This is one of his books, published in 1910. Nothing has changed about these men. Hirschfeld invented the word transvestite and also knew it wasn't adequate. The word he needed was autogynephile, but that wouldn't be invented for another 70 years. But he knew the sexual obsession with being female that took over these men's personalities and their lives, because he was a crossdresser. He was an AGP, and he was gay. This is where I disagree with Ray Blanchard, who coined the term autogynephile. Blanchard thinks there's a bifurcation between gay men and autogynephiles. I don't agree. There are too many gay men who are also autogynephiles. I think AGP is the overarching category that then bifurcates between gay and straight. Regardless, for the first 50 years, transvestism was understood to be a sexual fetish. Then his colleague, Harry Benjamin, brought his ideas to America. Now, the dude was a total nut job. Benjamin's 1966 book, The Transsexual Phenomenon, he asserted that transsexualism is not a psychological issue, but a somatic disorder that could only be treated through medical intervention. Benjamin invented the affirmation model of, quote, treatment, which is now wrecking thousands of gay, lesbian, traumatized, and confused youth around the world. Understand that up to that point, no one had theorized a mystical essence that could get trapped in the wrong body. Benjamin wanted to insert a narrative that transsexualism was caused either by biology or that it was psychological and fixed in early childhood. Either way, it couldn't be changed. And the solution was medical intervention into perfectly healthy bodies. One of his patients was a wealthy woman who pretended to be a man, Reed Erickson, and in 1979 she founded and funded the Harry Benjamin International Gender Dysphoria Association. She also funded the Gender Clinic at Johns Hopkins, where John Money did his damage. This movement has had millions of dollars from the beginning. I know some of you only became aware of this all 5 years ago or maybe 10 years ago. It seems like it dropped out of the sky. Yeah, it didn't. They've been working long and hard, and they've had the money to do it. So in 1979, they put out their first standards of care. 1979 is also the year that Jan Raymond published The Transsexual Empire. Don't let anyone wonder where the women are. We have been fighting this from the beginning. So in 2007, they changed their name to WPATH, and here we are. Transsexualism, though, still had the word sex in it, and so that got swapped out for the newest version, transgender. But this is why they have always needed the so-called trans child. It's the born this way narrative. They need to cleanse the sexual fetish from the practice in the public's eye. So that's the sexologists who have largely worked to legitimize the sexual fetish of misogynist narcissists, giving them everything they wanted, including children, to act as human shields. Next up, the postmodernists. It's hard to do this in 5 minutes, but I'm going to try. Postmodernism is a challenge to Enlightenment rationality and any claim to universal ideas of reality, truth, morality, reason, or progress. So it starts from the understanding that truth claims and narratives of Western Europe aren't universal, but partial. Well, fair enough. You'd think the solution would be to open up the narrative and the process of knowledge construction to more voices with different perspectives to get us closer to this thing called truth or the thing called history or whatever. Instead, the postmodernists said, there is no such thing as truth or history or morality or reason. You know who these guys are? The family annihilators of philosophy. If I can't have it, no one can. And they burned it all down. Reality is a mental construct, and it's always mediated. There's no such thing as objective fact. Everything is an interpretation, and all interpretation is, quote, contingent. Now, what they mean by contingent is that it's more or less random. It's chance. No one knows why, for instance. Men are seen as the norm and women as the negation, but no one materially benefits. So power is dropped from every equation. Postmodernism is an absolute dead end for creating a resistance movement. This is Michel Foucault, who was one of the founders of postmodernism. He was brutally abused by his father. He also attended a strict Catholic school that he described as, quote, an ordeal, and God knows what happened to him there. By the next school, he was unpopular, and other students noted his obsession with violence and the macabre. He hung images of torture and war in his bedroom. He chased another student with a knife and also tried to commit suicide. The kindest thing I can think to say is that this was an extremely disturbed teenage boy on his way to becoming a sociopath. I think his intellectual work is him playing out his unmetabolized trauma. As an adult, he felt compelled to do horrible things, the classic repetition compulsion, and instead of facing that down and coming to terms with the abuse, he invented an entire philosophy of moral relativism that erased any notion of bad behavior or illegitimate power. He argued that there should be no restriction on sexual activity, including with children. That childhood innocence is just another contingent construct created by the legal system and religion and society, and that the pedophile is merely a phantom. No harm is done to children when men fuck them. The harm is in the creation of categories like innocent child and evil pedophile. He argued for the complete repeal of age of consent laws, and I mean down to infants. In case you think this was maybe a thought experiment gone too far, no. He routinely crossed from France to Tunisia and bought poor black boys for rape. And his favorite place for the rapes? A graveyard. This is the perfect patriarchal horror story. It starts with one boy being viciously abused by his father, and 70 years later, there's an entire movement demanding the destruction of the generative organs of children. Children who will never experience sexual pleasure, children who will never have children of their own. Are you happy, Michelle? Have you annihilated enough? Postmodernism spawned queer theory. In 1982, Gail Rubin wrote the founding document of queer theory, which is called Thinking Sex. She suggests that sex is somehow oppressed, so sex is the thing that needs to be liberated. Not women, not children. Yes, poor sex, it suffers so. She renamed the sexual abuse of children, quote, intergenerational sex. So now we're stuck with that, again with the pedophiles. Boy lovers are so stigmatized that it is difficult to find defenders for their civil liberties, let alone their erotic orientation. Well, I should hope so. This is the founding document of queer theory, arguing that men who rape boys are oppressed, her freedom fighters are rapists and pimps. So oppression is not one group materially exploiting another, but the act of labeling anything in a binary. The categories are the problem, not relations of power. Binaries have to be deconstructed through, quote, queering, so transgressing the boundaries of categories to render them meaningless. This to them is liberation. So we get to Judith Butler. This is 1991. We can't name men as oppressors. That's, quote, too totalizing a gesture. It only strengthens the binary. The category of woman itself is the problem. There are no real women. Woman is nothing but a parody without origin. When women unite as a group, they are only reinforcing a problematic category. So women cannot be the subject of feminism. She says that point blank. All we can do is have subversive performances of the self that break a binary. So for instance, women refusing men, creating a new life and new sexuality with women, that only strengthens the binary. But you know what's subversive? Lesbians who have sex with men. That's what she says, because that queers the category of lesbian. Butler destroyed the possibility of feminist resistance for an entire generation of women. She's barely understandable, but she did do that. What's organizing? Well, you make common cause with the people who share your condition. But that is impossible when women don't exist, and when noticing that they might only strengthens that big bad binary. If you're still wondering why there are so many of these men all of a sudden, there is an answer: pornography. I did click through so you don't have to, and I'm not going to inflict on you what comes next, but I will tell you there was one woman being choked, one woman having her head yanked back by her hair, a woman crying in pain, on an endless page of women being objectified, hurt, and sold for fun. And there's 13 billion search hits for this. Men are now saturated in the sexuality of pornography, in sex that is about power, not love, about cruelty, not care, about violation instead of connection. And some of them are going to find the subordinate role arousing. The porn industry is churning these guys out like tribbles. This is what men are doing to themselves with porn. That's what they think a woman is. In real life, these are the images that women are drowning in, a relentless display of women reduced to body parts, turned into objects, willingly abused, and loving it. That is the landscape of the mass media, only it's more like a hellscape. This is what women are fighting against to assert our humanity. How many of these photos do we have to see before the pattern is clear? This is what women are. This is what women are for. Here's the bargain basement version. He hasn't inserted any plastic into his face, but it's the same thing. There's so many versions of this, millions of photos. Does it get any clearer when you see grown-ass men dressed as sexy schoolgirls? Or ballerinas? Or adult babies? If you don't think this has real-world consequences, ask me about David Challoner in the Q&A. And this is what is waiting for them, an entire genre called sissification, or, quote, forced feminization porn. I don't have the heart to make you look at this. It's men taking on aspects of femininity as humiliation and pain for the purpose of sexual arousal. It's horrible watching human beings get humiliated and hurt, but until you enter this world at least a little bit, you will never understand the nature of this movement. This is where they are coming from. This is the hellmouth. Some of them will even admit it in public. He said it, sissy porn made me trans. This is Mr. Andrea Long-Chu, whose book Female, a Concern won a Pulitzer Prize. Femaleness is a universal sex defined by self-negation. All define as female any psychic operation in which the self is sacrificed to make room for the desires of another. The barest essentials of femaleness are an open mouth, an expectant asshole, blank, blank eyes. That's what these men think a woman is. And they want to be women because subordination gives them a hard-on. I'm sorry to be so crude, but that is the driving force behind this movement. Yeah, they've got a few billionaires, but that's what powers it, not what drives it. The driver is the paraphilia. These men are sexually aroused by the thought of themselves as a woman. It is now considered the worst kind of transphobia to mention autogynephilia when we say it. Meanwhile, many of them freely admit it. Autogynephilia describes not an obscure paraphilic affliction, but rather the basic structure of all human sexuality. This is not just because everyone has an erotic image of themselves as female, they do, but the assimilation of any erotic image is by nature female. He wants to claim that he's a woman, and the way he gets in is by insisting that everyone is a woman. But the reason he wants to be a woman is because a woman is the thing on which acts are done, and that idea gives him a thrill. This is vile, and no other oppressed group would ever be expected to put up with it. And if you think Mr. Andrea is a one-off, this was in the New York Times. So, because some men find the word woman offensive, the New York Times has decided, quote, individuals who have receptive vaginal sex is a reasonable replacement for the word woman. Women are passive sexual receptacles for an active male agent. This matches rather precisely how Mr. Andrea defines woman, and it is, of course, the entire endless point of pornography. Or as Catherine McKinnon said so succinctly, man fucks woman, subject, verb, object. You're allowed to be angry at this. You don't have to keep being nice. One reason we are losing this war is because women refuse to face the nature of these men. Oh, these poor dears suffer from gender dysphoria. No, they don't. Their suffering is entirely self-inflicted. They are obsessed with their subordination fetish to the point that it takes over their personalities and their lives, and they don't care who they destroy in the process. So to wrap this up, we say biology is real and that humans are a sexually dimorphic species. They insist that biology is a social construct because suddenly, after 2 billion years, sex is a spectrum and something about seahorses. We say gender is women's oppression, and we've got centuries of mutilated feet, genitals, and rib cages to back us up. They say no, gender is great fun. The only problem is we don't get to choose between the dominant and subordinate roles. And some men really want the submissive role, and they are enraged when they are denied. The name for that is aggrieved entitlement. Take that home. You're going to need it. Our solution is to dismantle male supremacy. Their solution runs into trouble. They know that biology is not a story humans made up. They can't dismantle it. The best they can do is to stop anyone from talking about it. Our best outcome would be women's liberation. Their best outcome? Well, women are losing the ability to talk about sex-based oppression since sex doesn't exist. The women on the front lines are, as ever, the least of us. Women in homeless shelters, in prisons, in battered women's shelters are being forced to share intimate spaces with men who claim to be women. The dignity and safety of the most vulnerable women have been weighed against the feelings of sexual predators, and the feelings of those men have been declared more important. Feminists warned where this would end, and now here we are. I want everyone to imagine the terror of being locked in an 8x10 cell with a rapist. This is happening to women. Ultimately, the genderists want to liberate men's sexual fetishes. This is a men's sexual rights movement, and for that, they need women's subordination. We expected authoritarians from the right. We weren't prepared for it from the left. Women have lost their jobs, they've lost their careers, they've lost publishers, they've lost custody of their kids, and they've been physically assaulted. The most basic facts of biology are now considered hate speech, which means the reality of women's lives is back to being unspeakable. The worst part is, no one believes us. Civic institutions that were built as a bulwark against power are crumbling. The ACLU has actively tried to keep citizens from accessing Freedom of Information Act requests. The American Booksellers Association has declared a feminist book, quote, hate speech. Journalists are afraid of losing their jobs. If all of this doesn't chill you, nothing will. At Harvard, a professor is in trouble for saying pregnant women. Academia has fallen, though Hogwarts still stands. And people I counted as friends and comrades just want to keep their heads down so they can keep their jobs, hoping that the fever will break because this can't go on. Well, it can. That's the thing. It can get worse. I'm asking the same question now I did as a child. Are you for women's liberation? I still want to know who has my back. I want to know who's going to find that unimpeachable courage and confront male power. And if we can't do it for ourselves, we have to do it for her, because there is no one else to do it. So one more time, are you for women's lib? Thank you.